Thank you so much for coming and giving me the privilege of talking to you. I love to talk about the providence of God. And Ruth is a hard book. It's a beautiful book. It's a beautiful little story with a great God. And it's probably because it's Ruth that 2/3 of you are women. It's the closest thing I've ever had to a women's conference. And that's okay. And there's a lot of gray hair out there, and let me assure you that the hero in this story is not Ruth, it's Naomi. This is a book about Naomi, and she was the older one, and she was dealt the worst blow, 6 of them, and learned how to trust God in them. And so there's something here for the Ruths at the younger end and the Naomis at the older end and the Elimelechs who die and the Malons and the Chilians who die and the Boazes who are a little bit older and in the middle and who are used by God to bring wonderful blessing into a broken woman's life. And it's really a good book. I like this book. And I preached on it back in 1984, and so dug out those old sermons to work on, and I've been reveling in it now for some days and getting it all fresh again for myself. So I hope that it's fresh for you. I would suggest that in the days here, if the rain stays, you go away and read it 4 times. Just read the whole book. It takes about 25 minutes at a leisurely pace to read this book. And just read the book 4 times. Read it before each session. So you've already missed one, but maybe you read it. I hope you did. But before tomorrow morning, read it again. And then before tomorrow night, read it again. And then before Thursday morning, read it again. My plan is to take 1 chapter for every session that we're together and to work it over and to draw out of it all that we can in the minutes that we have. I'm assuming that peace is flowing like a river for a lot of you, and sorrow is billowing over a lot of you. And some of you are the very same person in which both of those are happening all at once. And so there's good things for everybody here. And may the Holy Spirit come and minister to our hearts and fit us. I was thinking as I thought about, I looked at the age range, and not all of you gave your age, but they give me little booklet and tell me all how many women and how many men, how many Presbyterians and where you come from and things like that. And so it sets me to pondering. And my dad is 81. And, when you think about sweet and bitter providences and learning how to live with hard things in life, you think that, well, you pass through those and you learn how to do that. You learn how to rest and cope, and yet here I am, I'm 55, and my dad is 81, and I'm ministering my dad a lot these days. He lives in Easley, South Carolina, and I live in Minneapolis, and this is not easy. Just last year, his wife, my stepmother, my dad has celebrated a 36th wedding anniversary and a 25th wedding anniversary with 2 different women. And I love both of my moms. My mother is with Jesus. She was killed in a car accident, and that's one of the hardest things I think I've walked through. But now this wife is in a nursing home. That's not a happy situation. He lives in the big empty house, totally empty. It's a huge house. And this is not good. I'm trying to convince him there's a better way to do this. And 81-year-olds are not easy to convince of anything. And to leave a 25-year house is one of the hardest things to do. And so when an elderly couple, one of them gets farther along in their ability for anybody to cope with them, they have to do something. And so in other words, you don't get through the billows. It doesn't get over until you die. And then it's okay. It's really okay. And so I'm aware that my dad is still learning. I'm ministering Ruth to my dad. and reminding him of what he preached for 60 years plus. And we never get beyond the need to be exhorted with these things. Another context with regard to the women is that Ruth really is quite a model woman in this text. Naomi is too, in her own way. We'll talk about that. But I noticed in the seminars there's Becoming a Godly Woman choices that some of you can make, and that's good. That's a real good link up with what we're dealing here. And I'm married to one of these, and I'll tell you a few stories along the way about that, because Ruth is really amazing. The woman Ruth, not just the book, but the woman Ruth is really quite remarkable in some of the things that she did. And we'll talk about that too. And I'm a pastor, son, husband, pastor, and so breaking over my heart are not just my own difficulties with my children and my marriage and my father and my whatever, but my people. There's a lot of people in our church, and last thing somebody tells me on the phone last night is that my friend Doug Heil's mother, on the way back from Alaska in the plane, had a heart attack at 30,000 feet and died on the plane. And he was on his way up to Montana, I think, to bring the body home, where the plane made an emergency landing. What a hard thing for a husband to be sitting beside a wife on a plane and have her slump over and die. I mean, so we'll be dealing with that. And I could, of course, like the other pastors here, there are 10 or 12 of you here. You don't just bear with your own bitter providences, but everybody else's as well. This is a very great book. It's a book that I hope will make this a memorable time together for us. And so you read it, you ponder it, you pray over it, and I'll do my best to open it for us. You list a few things, what it's about, just to get you ready to be thinking and praying. It's a story for people who wonder where God is when there are no dreams and no visions and no prophets. See, that's one of the remarkable things about this book. This is really wisdom literature. There's not a prophet in this book. There are no dreams in this book. There are no visions in this book. This book is written very much like the way you live. It is a book where God is almost entirely in the background. Not quite as much so as the book of Esther. The book of Esther, the book of Job, the book of Ruth, they all have the same message. It's all about providence. In Esther, the word God is never even mentioned. Isn't that remarkable? In Ruth, he's mentioned often, but he never sends anybody to say anything. There's no prophet. He's just acting. Like in your life. I'm here to persuade you that he's acting in your life. And they couldn't see it any more easily than you could see it, because there was no lightning striking and no thunder sounding in the book of Ruth. Nothing extraordinary in this book. Zero extraordinary in this book. It's all ordinary. Job, of course, has a lot of extraordinary things. You got Satan dealing with God in heaven. And then you've got those amazing chapters at the end. And so this is a modern book. It's like it's written by a modern person who's not sure they even believe in prophets and dreams and visions, which of course are real because they're all over the Bible. But Ruth lets us say, I could have lived that life. I could have done that, any of that. So it's a book for people who wonder where God is when there's no extraordinary lightning flashing. It's a book for people who experience not just a tragedy, but 6 tragedies back to back. One of the things that I marvel at in life is that God does not apportion out pain evenly. Some people hardly get any. And some people, when they stand up from falling down, bump their head on the cabinet. And when they reach for their head, hit their finger on the cabinet. And when they cry out about their finger, wake the baby who starts crying. And, I mean, it just kind of one after the other. There's some people that just seem to be cursed, and they feel that way. And we'll talk about Naomi's experience like that. It's for people who wonder about whether a lifetime of integrity and commitment keeping is worth it. Some of you are in marriages right now, and you just wonder whether it's worth it to keep the promise. There's a lot about integrity in this book, and commitment, and hanging in there when it looks like there's no future for hanging in there. It's a story for people who wonder whether anything great could come out of ordinariness. Most of you in this room feel very ordinary. And you wonder, is anything significant that can come from an ordinary life? You know, just, what day is today? Is this Monday or Tuesday? Okay. Day before yesterday, I was preaching, and I closed with an illustration about J.I. Packer, who almost committed suicide when he was a student at Oxford because he was surrounded by perfectionistic teaching and was rescued, thank God, by John Owen from 350 years before through a book on indwelling sin, which taught him how to understand his own sin nature that abides. And he tells how he went as an unbeliever to an Oxford Christian Union, and a man named Earl Langston preached, an absolute no-name. And he said, the scales fell from my eyes, and I saw the way in. Now, maybe you don't even know who J.I. Packer is, but he's one of my living heroes and teaches theology up at Vancouver, wherever Northwest is from here. But he's alive and doing well and has written lots of books, and he was brought to Christ by a nobody. Of course, so was Billy Graham. So that was an illustration to me of one of the points of this book. This is a very ordinary situation, little family, out-of-the-way place, and the book ends on an absolutely stunning note of universal significance to this family. So it's a very refreshing book. It has the right, to me, it has the right balance of pain and pleasure. There's some sweet, good, happy things that happen in this book. Make you want to dance, they're so happy. And there's some other things that are so sad. You wonder how Naomi survived. So it's good. It's good. So let's read chapter 1. Take your Bibles, and I'll read the entire chapter, and then we'll get into it. The reason it comes where it does, Judges, Ruth, is because of verse 1. In the days when the judges ruled, that's why it's put in the canon where it is. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a certain man of Bethlehem, and you know, from our vantage point in redemptive history, you just got to hear that in a certain way because of the way the book ends. Boaz, Obed, David, son of David, the Christ born in Bethlehem. I don't think the writer probably knew that. But from our standpoint, in a canonical understanding of this book, I doubt this is an accident in God's providence. A man of Bethlehem in Judah went to sojourn in the country of Moab. He and his wife and his 2 sons, the name of the man was Elimelech. Now Elimelech, Melech, king in Hebrew, El, God, E, the little my suffix. So my God is king. Now that's really very significant. My God is king. He drops dead. And that poses the problem the book is written to solve. Is God really your king if you drop dead? Can God do anything with a situation as king if the man whose name is my God is king drops dead, beginning of the story? The answer to that is yes. And that's what the book is meant to teach. The name of the man was Elimelech. My God is king. And the name of his wife, Naomi. Now, Naomi means pleasant. Means pleasant. And the names of his sons were Mahlon and Chilion. I don't think they have any particular meaning, at least I'm not aware of it. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem in Judah. They went into the country of Moab and remained there. But Elimelech, the husband of Naomi, died. She was left with her 2 sons. These took Moabite wives. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. They lived there about 10 years, and both Mahlon and Chilion died. So the woman was bereft of her 2 sons and her husband. And it's not mentioned, but notice, 10 years they were married. Any children? 0. 0. 2 barren marriages for 10 years in a culture that put everything in children. She had to feel cursed, right? I blew it. I shouldn't have come to Moab. Well, maybe she did. We'll talk about that. Then she started with her daughters-in-law to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had visited his people and given them food. So she set out from the place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on their way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, "Go, return each of you to her mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find a home, each of you in the house of her husband." So go ahead, remarry. Don't go with me. Then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, "No, we will return with you to your people." But Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, to your way. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. And if I should say I have hope, then if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they're grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? No, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter." That's where I got the title, Bitter Providence. "It is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me." That's her reading of the situation. We'll talk. Is that true? Perhaps. Perhaps yes, perhaps no, perhaps both. Then they lifted up their voices and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if death parts me from you." And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. So the 2 of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. So it's been at least 10 years. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" And she said to them, Call me not Naomi, that is pleasant. Call me Mara, which means bitter. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. So again, she attributes it to God. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. There it is a third time. God's the one who did this hard thing, she says to me. My life is a pain, and it's God who's done it. Why call me Naomi, pleasant, when the Lord has afflicted me? There it is a fourth time. And the Almighty has brought calamity. There it is a fifth time upon me. So, Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab. And then this sweet line, this is one of the artistic beauties of this writer. He ends the first part of the story, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. A little twinkle in his eye. Guess what's going to happen at the barley harvest? But this is sad. He didn't tip his hand entirely yet, but this is a chapter of pain with a little window of hope at the end of it, which will be significant because Naomi can't see that window for anything. That's very significant. So we have a lot to learn here. So let's go back now and see what we can see. Verse 1, I already mentioned the time of the judges. Now you know the time of the judges. Joshua dies. He's brought the people into the promised land after Moses couldn't. God prospers them. They take the land that he's appointed to them for centuries. Now there's a 400-year period of the judges, and it was a terrible time in the history of Israel. The book of Judges is the most perplexing, horrible book in the Old Testament almost, because there are no heroes in it. Everybody's bad. Everybody's bad. Samson is bad, and he's one of the best. Deborah comes off perhaps better than any of them, but it's a bad book, this bad history. They sin. Everybody does what's right in his own eyes. You remember the last verse in the book, chapter 21, verse 25. So you can see it just before Ruth. In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. So it's one of the darkest times of Israel's history. They would sin. God would send enemies against them. They would cry for help. God in his mercy would send and raise up a judge and then deliver them. There would be a season of peace. They would rebel and murmur again, and then he'd send enemies, and then they'd cry out, and that was the rhythm all the way through. So this little book, Ruth, coming right after that verse, every man did what was right in his own eyes, and in the first verse of Ruth saying, this happened during that period, that's significant. This book happened in the darkest of times. So it raises the question, can anything good be happening? Can God in his amazing providence, while all this junk is going on in Israel, be doing anything long-term and glorious? That's what this book is about. Quietly, hidden, in the midst of the chaos and the evil and the failure, there's this little family of tragedy. And God quietly at work, bringing us to the last chapter and the last verse about David and the son of David and the Messiah and Jesus on the way. So position this carefully in the flow of biblical history, and you'll, I think, be helped in these points. The last verse of the book of Ruth, chapter 4, verse 22. The child born to Ruth, Boaz, is during the period of the judges. Obed is his name. Becomes the father of Jesse. Jesse becomes the father of David, who led Israel to her greatest time, heights of glory, along with Solomon. So during the worst of time, a family was being providentially created so that from that line would come the king of the greatest time. God is plotting for the glory of his people at a national level and for this little family's personal blessing as well. Which is, I gave Marty a song, and he's probably never heard of this song because it's not very popular. In fact, I had a very grievous reminder of that on the website the other day by somebody whose theology I do not admire and may refer to this person later. But one of the books that I wrote is called The Hidden Smile of God, published last year. And that comes from a line in this hymn by William Cooper. God moves in a mysterious way his wonders to perform. He plants his footsteps in the sea and rides upon the storm. Ye fearful saints, fresh courage take. The clouds you so much dread are big with mercy and will break in blessings on your head. Judge not the Lord by feeble sense, but trust him for his grace. Behind a frowning providence he hides a smiling face. His purposes will ripen fast, unfolding every hour. The bud may have a bitter taste, but sweet will be the flower. Deep in unfathomable minds of never-failing skill, he treasures up his bright designs and works his sovereign will. Blind unbelief is sure to err and scan his work in vain. God is his own interpreter, and he will make it plain. Now, this theologian quoted my book and said, I just ran across this little ditty. He quoted this hymn. Just ran across this little ditty and said, a lot of evangelicals are believing this sort of thing these days. That's really sad. We don't just believe them, we die for them. Because Ruth is all about behind a frowning providence, he hides a smiling face. If there's not a smiling face of God behind the frowning providences of our lives with divine, good, and godly purposes in them, then I'm quitting the ministry and will eat and drink and be merry, for tomorrow I will die. The book of Job, which I taught, I think, the last time I was here, you remember from reading it and studying the Bible yourself, is summed up by James chapter 5, verse 11. We know the patience of Job and have learned the mercy of God. Job is about the mercy of God's purposes. That's what it's mainly about. That's what this text, this book, is mainly about. The worst of times judges, leading to the best of times through an inconsequential little family. Let's take verses 1 to 5 and see what they say. They describe Naomi's misery. Naomi's misery. And so let me give you 6 hammer blows against this poor woman. Number 1, the famine. Verse 1. There was a famine in Judah where she lived. Now, who causes famines? Who does Naomi think causes famines? Naomi believes God causes famines. Now, we're going to test whether Naomi's right here. I think she's right. I'm going to commend her. Leviticus 26:3. So this would be something she'd know about. I didn't choose a New Testament text. I could choose texts from Jesus where he stills the storm and, he commands winds, he commands waves. Jesus is clearly in charge of the weather. But you didn't have to know about Jesus to know this. Leviticus 26:3, God says, if you walk in my statutes and observe my commandments and do them, then I will give you your rains in their season, and the land shall yield its increase. So clearly God has the authority to give rains and make increase, and to withhold rains and make famine. She knew this. So she was not going to solve the problem of a bitter providence by saying the devil did the famine. In fact, I wonder if I can put my hand on it. Oh, look, Psalm 105. Turn to Psalm 105. I just got to give you this off my front burner from a sermon that I preached 2 weeks ago, I think. Are you there, Joanne, for this? I got 2 of my folks here from Minnesota. Makes me feel happy. Let's see. Or is it Psalm 106? Oh, shoot. Where's the famine? Where? 105:16. He called a famine. Thank you. There it is. He called for a famine. That's God. God called for a famine upon the land. He broke the whole staff of bread. He sent a man before them. This is Joseph now. It's the story of Joseph. He sent a man before them, Joseph, who was sold as a slave. They afflicted his feet. They afflicted his feet with fetters. He himself was laid in irons until the time that his word came to pass. The word of the Lord tested him. The king sent and released him. The ruler of the peoples set him free. He made him lord of his house and ruler over all his possessions, to imprison his princes at will, that he might teach his elders wisdom. Israel also came into Egypt. Thus Jacob sojourned in the land of Ham, and he caused his people to be very fruitful and made them stronger than their adversaries. He turned their heart to hate his people, to deal craftily with his servants. He sent Moses, his servant, and Aaron, whom he had chosen, and they performed his wondrous acts, etc. So God, verse 16, God summoned a famine, and he broke the staff of bread. And he sent a man before them, Joseph, who was sold as a slave. I'm still not finding the word I'm looking for, where it says the reason he sent Joseph was to save the people. You see that? Somebody, you're so smart. Where's that? To preserve the people. That's in here somewhere. Shoot, I shouldn't have tried this. 43. He brought forth his people with joy. He chose them once. No. Oh, well. Well, yeah, sure, it's in Genesis 50:20, but it's here too. Never mind, I'll just tell you what I'm... It says he summoned this famine, and you all know that he sent Joseph down there to position Joseph to become the vice president, so that Joseph could all that grain together, so that when the Israelites were starving, they'd send down there and be rescued and saved. And I said to the people, if you want to save the people, there's an easier way to do it. Don't summon the famine. So she's right. Naomi's right that this is of God here. So number one, a stroke of famine against Naomi and her husband and their sons. Number two, they make the difficult decision. Was it a right decision? The writer doesn't tell us. I don't know. To go to Moab. They went to Moab. Now that's playing with fire, because the Bible taught very plainly to separate yourself from Moab and the surrounding nations, not to intermarry with them, and not to worship their gods. And so they go to Moab, and what happens? Her husband dies. What did she say to herself? We should have never come. Should have never come. Like we can die in Judah. So there's famine. Secondly, there's exile from their homeland. That's hard. And then third, there's death of the husband. And then lo and behold, there are these foreign marriages. They take Moabite, verse 4, they take Moabite wives, Orpah and Ruth. And that must have grieved their mother's heart. Oh dear, they don't even have Jewish wives now. Will they ever go home? And then 10 years and no children to either marriage. And then they die. So this is the point of building in the first 5 verses. The first 5 verses, this sixfold tragedy: famine, exile, death of the husband, foreign marriages, 10 years of childlessness, and the death of the husbands and sons. I mean, this woman must have felt, I've been abandoned. I've been absolutely abandoned by God. And he's beaten up on me big time because I blew it by coming to Moab. I probably encouraged my husband to go to Moab. And then in verse 6, Naomi gets word that the Lord, so now there's the proof, the Lord has visited his people and given them food. So the Lord took and the Lord gave. He's giving them food. And she decides to return to Judah. Now, verses 8 to 13. Why is so much space given to her effort to persuade her daughters-in-law not to go with her? It was like, it's kind of odd. Why not just let them come? Or why would this writer spend? And let me give you 3 ideas, 3 reasons for why I think the writer devotes so much space in verses 8 to 13 for why there's an effort on Naomi's part to persuade them to go back. The first is to emphasize her misery. Verse 11, Naomi said, "Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters. Go your way, for I am too old to have a husband." In other words, Naomi has nothing to offer them, she's saying. There is this Levirate law that says if there's a brother surviving a man who dies, he should marry the widow and raise up offspring to his name. But I don't have any. There's nothing I can offer you. If I got married tonight and had a child 9 months from now, would you wait 18 years or so before you could have the Levirate experience of a husband? So go home, go home. I think the point here is I am destitute. I have nothing to offer you. You come with me, you will have the same experience of destitution that I'm now experiencing. So I think it's the first reason is no, my daughters. Verse 13, no, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone forth against me. Don't come with me. God is against me. That's pretty devastating. Don't come with me. God is against me. Second reason, I think, for these verses is to prepare us for the custom, which in fact is going to be the solution to the problem of childlessness. When Boaz, as a distant relative, emerges on the scene, it's precisely this Levirate custom that she's referring to here that's going to be the solution. So it kind of gives us a little pointer and a glimpse of what is coming. But Naomi, she is so wounded and she is so hopeless here and so beat up on that she can't see any hope. She's forgotten Boaz. Isn't he in her mind? There's a Boaz in your family. In fact, there's two men who could do this because Boaz had to get his way around somebody who had priority over him. And so there are at least two distant relatives that could have married both of these girls. She thought about it, but she didn't think about it. And now, let me just pause for a lesson here. And I see it in my lunch that I had yesterday with a man. I see it in one of my sons. And the lesson is this. Pain and sorrow and tragedy mount to the point where they make people blind to hope that's really there in their lives. You can experience so many bad things for so long that you become almost in love with your pain. You don't call it that, you'd never say that, but you begin to start to cloak yourself with your pain. There was a man in this Job thing we did here last year who confessed to me several months later. He said, I came to that thing feeling so sorry for myself. He's a widower. And that I realized by the end of that I was my biggest problem. And I had to be shaken with Job and his pain out of my self-pity so that I could begin to live again. And he was just remarried, by the way. He's probably 70. God did a Boaz kind of thing for him. He won't do it for all of you, but he did it for him. And I don't think that would have happened had he stayed wallowing in his misery. So I think the lesson here is get in each other's faces with hope. Because you've got to be the hope for the people around you who just don't see it. You may see it everywhere. This guy I had lunch with yesterday has been to my church 3 times. He's an alcoholic, smokes like a chimney, has for the last 47 years. He's got terminal cancer, scared the hell out of him, literally, and he came to church when the doctor told him he had about 6 months to live. He hadn't been in church for 50 years. And he reeked to high heaven, was half drunk to get himself through the service about 2 months ago or so. And he came up to me then, and he took me and he said, now, this is going to be on tape, and you will understand, I'm quoting somebody here, so this is not the kind of language I use, all right? He said, Pastor, anybody that pisses me off like you did, I want to get to know. I said, good, you're the kind of guy I'd like to eat lunch with. So I went over to his house that afternoon. Well, I hadn't been in a house like this. I mean, this house, he lives in northeast Minneapolis, which is just full of pain and alcoholism, and he lives with a woman that's not his wife for 13 years, and the TV's blaring, he's sitting around, beer cans everywhere, ashtrays everywhere, the place reeks, it's an absolute pig pen. And I sit down there and share the gospel with him, and he falls on the floor, crying out for mercy. And prays, he prays a prayer, and I'm thankful, but... So he's been back twice since then. So I got a couple in the church that I knew had been through some of this stuff. I knew their background. So they wouldn't be offended at this language. They can handle this. And I sicked them on him, and they've been after him now for all these months. And one of them called me on the phone on Sunday or Saturday and said, I won't use his name, Joe, let's call him Joe. Joe would really like to see John again. So I called Joe on Sunday afternoon. I said, I got one little window Monday for lunch before I head out of town. Let's do lunch. He said, well, he was drunk. He's always drunk. And he said, well, when? I said, well, when? Anywhere tomorrow, you know? He said, well, the later the better, because I go function in the morning. So I said, how about 11:45? So we went. The point is this. He's absolutely hopeless. He's scared to death. He believes in hell. He believes in his head in Jesus. He's willing to say anything I'll tell him to say. He's getting no victory. He's got to yield because there's a deep rebellion in here. He says so. Because I said, do you realize that in yesterday's service at our church, there were 30 guys from Teen Challenge? Some of them your age, some of them younger, some of them older, all of them exactly like you, getting healed by Jesus, by this terrific ministry of drug rehabilitation. He said, I've been to 13 treatment centers. I said, have you ever been to a Christian one? No. I said, I want you to go. He said, I'm going to go. I said, you're a rebel. That's why you're not getting better. He said, I know I'm a rebel. And he's smoking these Camels with no filter, and they look like, you know, they just look like they're designed to kill you, which they are. I mean, they're killing him. And I said, you know what? There's signs of hope all over your life. I can point to this. Got to my church. It was one of our young guys that got him there. I have no idea how he got him there. A guy named Steve Dykstra brought him to church. And he came back, and then he walked up and used that awful language to me, and I went to visit him. I don't go to visit people in my church. I mean, visitors who come, good night. There's 200 visitors every Sunday. But I came to visit you. Why? I don't know. It was in my heart to do it. I don't take people out to lunch the day before I go out of town. And Gary and Brenda, they don't get in people's lives. There's hope all over you. You're scared of hell. You preach to those people at the bar, and they tell you to be quiet. Don't you see hope, man? No. That's where Naomi was. She couldn't see anything. She had been so weighted down. And so when you know a Naomi, don't agree with her that there's no hope. Don't agree with her. You be her hope. You keep telling her that there's hope. And show it to her and live it out for her. That's my hope, is that I'm going to be in this guy's life until he dies. And he's going to die soon. He won't live long. And I just hope that he'll yield to the lordship of Jesus before it's too late. The third reason, I think, for this is to make Ruth's faithfulness. Third reason why verses 18 to 13 are spelled out so in detail about trying to persuade them to go back is that it makes Ruth's faithfulness to Naomi appear so amazing. So amazing. So verse 14, Orpah kissed her goodbye, and Ruth clung to her. And then there's this second entreaty, go away, verse 15. And it's this bleak description of Naomi's future and her statement, God is against me, that makes Ruth's embrace of her God stunning. Let's read this, verses 16 and 17. Entreat me not to leave you, nor to return from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die. And where you're buried, in other words, I'm in this forever. I'm never coming home. You see, if you die, I'm not going back to mama. Isn't that amazing? Why would she do that? Well, the next line probably tells you. Where you die, will die. May the Lord do so to me, and more also. And then she talks about your God. Verse 16, your God will be my God. Now that's the most amazing thing. after Naomi says, the hand of the Lord is against me, Ruth says, your God will be my God. Now, there are a lot of lessons here. Here's one. Don't be afraid of speaking your belief in the providence of God in the hard things of life for fear that you're going to make people unbelievers. You will in some people. Some people will be turned away by the truth, but others are going to be mightily established. Ruth was. She heard all this stuff coming out of Naomi's mouth about God did this to me, and God did this to me, and God did this to me. And her response was, your God will be my God. Now, it doesn't go into detail as to why in the world she would have a faith like that, but she had 10 years with perhaps a godly husband who taught her about the Red Sea and the care in the wilderness and the Jordan River and the defeat of the peoples, and told the story of redemption and a coming one. And she believed it. And so when she heard Naomi's narration of the sovereignty of God in her life, she wasn't put off by it. She said, well, yeah, if there was a famine, and if your husband died and your sons died, and they married people like us, God's still in charge. In fact, that I would be married maybe through sin and be folded into a Jewish family when they should have stayed home is all grace to me. It's all grace to me. In fact, she's mentioned in the genealogy in Matthew 1. I think there are only 3 or 4 women mentioned, and they're all foreigners. This is grace here. Maybe it was sin. The writer doesn't care to tell us one way or the other that they went to Moab and they married. But for Ruth, it was life. I come into the line of King Jesus. She didn't know that fully yet. But that's what was going on. She knew she had been attached to the true God, and she wasn't about to walk away because the God was sovereign. She's going to bow and submit. Yeah, God is sovereign. Yeah, these are bitter providences. I have no better solution than to say God is sovereign over these things. What a woman. So here we are, women. This is a thing for the ideal woman. I'll tell you what I think an ideal woman is. Number 1, faith in God that sees beyond present bitter setbacks. She's not naive. She tastes it. It breaks over her like a billow. But when it comes, she doesn't turn away from God. She doesn't say it was Satan and not God. She embraces it. She cries over it. She experiences the pain of it. And she believes in that God. She trusts Him. Though He slay me, yet will I trust Him. That's the first trait of a great woman. Number 2, she admits that He's sovereign and that there are bitter setbacks and bitter providence as well as sweet ones. Third, because she believes in His sovereign goodness behind bitter setbacks, she becomes a free woman to leave securities and take risks. That's what I'm looking for in women. There's a lot of women who are sold out to security. You hear them talk about, oh, will my children be safe on the mission field? Come on, come on. Maybe, maybe not. I see this in the fact that she was leaving everything she knew. She didn't know Judah. She didn't know there'd be a Boaz. I'm going with a cursed widow to nowhere, and when she dies, I'm going to be in the same grave with her a few years later, and there'll be nobody to marry because I've committed myself to this woman. And if I were to marry another man not in this family, I'd have to link up with another mother-in-law, and I would have to leave Naomi. And I've committed myself to Naomi. I'm a widow to the day I die in a foreign land. That's a strong woman. That's a very strong woman. That's a commitment that's not easy to keep. And that's my fourth or fifth thing. I don't know how to count them here. Radical commitment in relationships. Some of you are in terrible marriages. Some of you are newer in those. Some have been there for 40 years. And they may not get better. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. And you're wondering, is it worth it to stay? Well, Ruth sure thought commitment was worth it. Courage to venture into the unknown. I'm married to one of these women. I see my time is up. I'll try to wrap this up in the next minute or two, and we'll just pick up wherever we leave off. My wife is Noelle. I'll just give you an illustration of what I mean here. And this is the kind of woman I say I'm looking for, not to marry. I've got one. Thank you. I don't need another one, because she's the Ruth type in this way. I was preaching on something and I quit. This is about 17 years ago. I was new in the pastorate, and I was so discouraged. I came home. I sat down at the dining room table. We were still at 1604 Elliott Avenue. The bedroom was right off the dining room here. She's in there putzing around in the bedroom doing something. And this is to illustrate her Ruth-like abandon to God's will. And I'm sitting there feeling sorry for myself and wanting to quit the ministry. And I said out loud, I think I'm going to go to Africa. And out of the room came these words. Tell me when to pack. Is that awesome? That's awesome. Most women would say, not in a lifetime you're going to Africa. Not with me, you're not going. Well, that's my little picture of the ideal woman there. Ruth here, having heard that God is a sovereign God, deals a woman bitter providences, and yet she knows that it's the true God. She has the commitment and the courage to venture out in new ways and head home. So I've got lots more to say about this chapter, and maybe less to say about the second chapter, so it just might work out tomorrow morning that we will even things out. But I do want to keep my word. So we'll pick it up right here as they go back in verses 19 and 20. Don't call me Naomi, call me Mara. We'll pick it up right there tomorrow morning. Let me pray with you as we close. Oh, Father in heaven, there are bitter providences, famines, Elimelechs in our lives that we love. God is my king, dying, children dying, marriages that seem imperfect to us when they happen or don't happen. And then homecomings that are painful with people who think my name is pleasant and it's bitter. And so, Lord, just take us and hold us right now. Hold us. We're not done with this book. There's lots more to see. But just begin to minister, I pray, and set free and give strength and stability to men and women in this room. I ask in Jesus' name.